Our guest today is Kelly McDonald, who is considered one of the nation's top experts on diversity, equity, and inclusion, leadership, marketing, and sales to people not like you, consumer trends, and leveraging the customer experience. She's a 4-time best-selling author and renowned speaker. She's also the founder of McDonald Marketing, which has twice been named one of the top ad agencies in the U.S. by Advertising Magazine and ranked as one of America's fastest-growing independently owned companies by Inc. magazine. She's been featured on CNBC, CNNMoney.com, SiriusXM Radio, and in Forbes Magazine, Business Week, and Fast Company. And her client experience includes such iconic brands as Toyota, State Farm, Nike, Harley-Davidson, Miller Coors, Great Clips, Sherwin-Williams, and of course, NASA. Kelly McDonald, welcome to Next Steps Forward.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Now, I appreciate your time. We were just talking before the show. You were traveling. You got home late. So again, really appreciate your time on this. So thank you. Kelly, let's jump right into it. You're the author of 4 best-selling books, including How to Work with and Lead People Not Like You, How to Market to People Not Like You, and Crafting the Customer Experience for People Not Like You.
Yeah.
People in our audience might have noticed a theme there, and that's a focus on the phrase, people not like you. As a top expert on diversity, equity, and inclusion, why don't those titles include the words diversity, equity, and inclusion?
Because, great question. I think when I say what I call the D word, diversity, that people tend to think very, very narrowly about that. They default to where diversity conversations started 20 years ago, which is, what I call the big 5, which is race, ethnicity, age or generational differences, gender, and LGBTQ or sexuality, et cetera. So those were the big 5, and that's all that diversity meant 20 years ago, those big 5. And my definition of diversity is any way that you can be different from me. And so, especially in business, if you're an introvert and I'm an extrovert, if you are in a rural community and I live in a loft in Manhattan, if, you are an engineer and I'm a graphic designer, our brains are going to be, working very, very differently in the way that we have conceptual ideas and things like that. So everything can be different that has nothing to do with what I call the envelope. The envelope is like what we see, right? Like I can see your age, I can see your gender, I can see, I can see your race, et cetera, or ethnicity. And I don't think that's what makes us us. I think that's a part of what makes us us. But I think what really makes us us and makes it sometimes hard to connect with people who are not like you are differences that have nothing to do with the envelope.
So you mentioned the D word.
Yeah.
Is it true that your presentations have actually avoided the D word, which is diversity, for 22 years?
Yes. I will sometimes just say the reason I don't talk about it using the D word, diversity, is that people think too narrowly. And what I want to do especially when I'm talking to audiences on stage, is I want them to think about all the ways that all the people that they work with, and especially maybe where the friction points are. And it's usually with somebody who's not like them, but in a way that is not part of that big 5. It might be like, wow, this person is just, this person is really stubborn and I'm not stubborn. I'm flexible, that kind of thing. And it's like, those are the friction points that end up happening to us at work and in our real lives. And maybe they have to do with the envelope. Maybe they don't, but I just wanted to, broaden people. So I really don't use that word very much at all.
And what led you to use the phrase people not like you instead of traditional DEI terminology? Was there an aha moment or what happened?
Yeah, actually it was. I was speaking when I first started my speaking career about the importance of marketing to the emerging Hispanic market. Again, this is 22 years ago. And so this was all new, and the census had just come out and now we could quantify how big the Hispanic market was. And, everybody wanted to, reach this lucrative consumer group. So I was doing a lot of presentations on how to market to U.S. Hispanics. And I did a very effective presentation for a client one time. And she pulled me aside afterwards and she said, that was great. And we would like to have you back and have you do something again. But we don't just value the Hispanic consumer. We value the, women consumers, Black consumers, Asian consumers. Do you have something broader than that? And of course, when you're self-employed and someone wants to give you money, the answer to every question is yes. And so I said, well, yes, of course I have something like that. And I didn't, but I had a year to do it. And so I created this presentation that was like all about tapping into new markets that might be different from what your core market is or whatever. And I went to, absolutely everything, millennials and, Gen Z and this and that. And then I was like, what do I call this sucker? I can't say like how to market to Hispanics and blacks and women and millennials, And so I just came up with people not like you. And they loved it. I mean, it's kind of catchy. I never intended it for it to be catchy. It was just trying to think of a way to like encapsulate it all. And that's how I came up with that. And then it kind of took off.
That's amazing. It's your brand now.
Yeah, it is.
And there are some real, for lack of a gentler term, thought police out there when it comes to DEI. Have you faced any pushback for not using the preferred DEI terminology? And if so, how'd you respond?
No, I have. That's an awesome question. And I have never received pushback for that because the audiences that I've spoken to, and some of them are in fact diversity conferences, they're conferences about DEI. And what they like about my material is I do think broadly. And I think people who are in that DEI space, whether they are HR executives, people in culture executives, other professionals like me who are experts in this area, is the true definition of diversity is somebody who's not like you, not just those, 5 pillars that I ticked off. And so they embrace it fully. I have never gotten any blowback from somebody who goes, I can't believe you're not using diversity and equity and inclusion. I'm all about it. And that comes through in my presentations. And in fact, those audiences actually come up to me afterwards and they're like, I love the way you framed that up. That is so powerful. And it's broader. And it should be broader. I mean, it should be as broad as we can possibly be because it's people not like us, whatever that is.
What do people normally think when they hear diversity? Diversity in the phrase diversity, equity, inclusion obviously evoke different responses from different people. And what's going to take for people who are afraid of or hostile to DEI to see its value? And at the same time, what's going to take for people who embrace it to understand and accept those who don't?
So if I was even answering this question a year ago, I would give you a different answer, right? So the climate, the business climate, especially in the political climate, has changed. And sadly, I think the D word, diversity, equity, and inclusion, has become, a dirty word in politics. It's become weaponized. And it's sad because it really shouldn't be. It is here. It is amongst us. I mean, we can't ignore it, and it's not a bad thing. It's actually a really good thing. But so all the more reason that I'm actually just talking about people not like you, because I don't want to alienate a potential person in the audience who's got a mindset that DEI is woke or bad or something like that. The reality is every one of us is working with people not like us every single day. And that doesn't make an organization a bad organization or anything. And in fact, it's been proven. There's in fact never been a study that has disproved the value of a diverse team. And when I say a diverse team, I'm talking about diversity of perspective and experience, not again, just color of skin, gender, age, etc. And so it's pretty hard to argue with the facts of the value of DEI. It's just that these days it's been, the phrase has been hijacked and often means something, woke or, super liberal. And it's really not. It's something that organizations of all sizes and all different types that are either left-leaning, right-leaning, or straight down the center, everybody is trying to hire and grow their teams with different perspectives because they know the value of those different perspectives. If we surround ourselves with people who are just like us, then there's never anybody new at the table to say, what about this? Or I have this perspective. And so there's value in it. I think all the more reason to move away from DEI because some people have a very, very narrow mindset of that is also not correct. And I don't mean to be dismissive or insulting to anyone who thinks that way. It's just, that's not what DEI really is. What DEI really is about different perspectives. And one of the things that creates our different perspectives is who we are. And then one of the things that is a key part of who we are is that envelope and all the experiences that go with it. I will never know what it's like to be a man. All I know is what it's like to be a woman, and so I need the perspective of a man, let's say, to round out something that I might be seeing in my way with this lens that looks like this. But what if I could broaden that lens to that? It's just that simple.
Well, and to your point, at the beginning of your response, it's a shame that words like diversity, the D word, in the political arena are getting weaponized.
Yeah.
It's going to be a buzzword of the day for whoever's at the bully pulpit there.
Yep.
But then you talk about diversity generically, and we're a nation built on immigrants. So we are diverse from, 249 years ago.
The get-go.
Right. And so how it's become such a demonizing, weaponizing topic, word, phrase, whatever it is just astonishing, because we've got the Statue of Liberty in New York Harbor, bring us your tired, your poor, et cetera. And it's just like, this is what we were built on. And so we need to embrace it. And that's why I love this not like us concept, because, is it softer? Sure.
Yeah.
But maybe that's what we need right now, because everything is so harsh and so hard and so in your face.
And it's more true, I think.
Sure, absolutely.
I think if I were to just say how to market, or how to work with people who are diverse, I don't think everybody has that lens of just any way you can be different from me. A pessimist is different than an optimist. A morning person is different than a night owl. I do a lot of speaking in the insurance industry, and so they love this example. I say, someone who is risk averse is very different than someone who is a risk taker, or someone who is in the accounting department is very different than someone who's in sales. That is language that everybody can get behind, and they go, oh yeah, okay, I never thought about it that way. And then we're starting to have a productive conversation. And so all I want to do is have a productive conversation, Chris, about a really important topic. And if I've got to kind of move around and dodge around the D word to get there, I'll do it, because my goal is the outcome, and if the language that we use is a little more, if people are a little more accepting of that. And I also think it turns a little bit of a light bulb on for them. Like, so many people will come up to me and they'll be like, I never thought of it that way. I never thought about, or even like north and south. Somebody who's from rural Georgia is very different than someone who lives in Chicago, and there's just no refuting that. So it kind of like takes the sting out of all of it. And everybody goes, oh, okay, yeah, people not like me. All right.
Well, and the way you phrase it is, someone in accounting is different than somebody in sales. It's, to your point, much broader than just white, black, Hispanic, Asian,
totally
straight, not. And so this is a very important topic. So again, thrilled you're here today.
And Chris, somebody who's been working for 30 years is very different than somebody who's been working for 90 days. You can take this in any avenue you want, and people go, oh yeah. So that doesn't mean the person who's only been working for 90 days doesn't have any value to the team. You just have to understand that they're going to be wildly different than somebody who has 30 years of experience in that.
And maybe as a follow-up to that, setting aside that we're all individuals and the whole quote, there's no one else like us line, from a practical standpoint, is it fair to say there are more people not like us than like us?
I think so. I don't have any metrics on that, but I think, whatever I am, right? So I'm an extrovert, right? And I'm a morning person, and I'm a woman, and I'm, 63 years old, and blah, 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 right? All these things I can sort of identify about myself. And, I'm a task person. I like to check things off my list. There's probably far more people who don't line up with those things that I just rattled off than do. And so, yeah, the answer to your question is, yeah, there's far more people who are probably not like us than like us. And that's another reason to not just stay in the bubble of people like you. It's really easy to do that because it's so easy to get along with people that you just click with, and you get them and they get you. And you're like, yeah, we're both like get it done people. Let's knock things off our list. And somebody else who's a procrastinator might drive us crazy, but maybe they're really good at something else, and we need that.
I'm especially fascinated by your books on crafting the customer experience and marketing to people not like you. And we're going to dive into those topics later in our conversation. But we have to talk first about the elephant in the room, which you touched on earlier. And that's how the new president seems to have instantaneously and dramatically turned diversity, equity, and inclusion upside down and inside out. You've recently released your 4th bestseller. It's time to talk about race at work. Does Donald Trump have it out for you, or is there something bigger going on?
Nobody's ever asked me that question in quite that way. But I would say he doesn't have it out for me personally, but he definitely has a platform. And his platform is to, squash DEI. I truly believe that, I got to say this diplomatically. I truly believe that it is less about how he actually feels about it and more about throwing red meat to his base. Because I think his base thinks it's BS, and it's just hogwash, and it's discrimination in some form sometimes, and we don't need this and all that kind of stuff. So I think it's, he's very good at throwing red meat to his base. He really is. I mean, honestly, he's a brilliant marketer. And so whether it's immigration, and making immigrants scary to people, which is why we need to get rid of them or something like that. I think he's very good at knowing what his base wants to hear, and he gives it to them. And that makes him a smart marketer. I don't agree with any of it, but it makes him a brilliant marketer. And I would bet that much of what he says around DEI is just, again, a campaign slogan, and it's words that have been proven to be effective. And if you're a politician, when you land on something that clicks with your voters, run with it. I get the business of the politics. So he's not doing me any favors right now, and he's not doing, a lot of companies. And I think that's why they're backing down. I mean, sadly, I think that's why so many of these companies are reeling in their DEI efforts, but they're not really doing that. They're actually continuing with them. Maybe they're spending a little bit more money, but they're calling them other things. They're calling them culture and inclusion, because nobody has a problem with culture and inclusion. So,
well, I've got a surprise for you. We've got President Trump calling in right now to have a debate with you.
Okay, bring it.
I'm kidding.
I would actually find that really fascinating. I would not shy away from that. I would be like,
that I know.
Okay,
that I know.
Run a brush through my hair here.
Our next show, we'll bring him in next time.
Please do.
Kelly, we're seeing a number of big companies, banks like Wells Fargo, retailers like Target, suspending or killing their DEI programs.
Yeah.
What's your message to the corporate giants you've worked with? And if someone owns a small or medium-sized business, what should they do now?
Well, the first thing is, I don't think that any of the companies that I've read about, including the ones that you've just listed, have actually killed their DE&I programs. They have maybe reduced them. They've kind of, reined in some of the budgets and maybe some of the titles and things like that. But they're still pushing forward on culture and inclusion. What I think is really sad is that leaders in the industry like Target, who did, a really big push for pride years ago, kind of setting the standard up here for, mega retailers to say, this is a holiday and this is something that, our customers want, and we need to celebrate this. I think it's really sad that they have caved to the political pressure that's out there. At the end of the day, Chris, it's all about the almighty dollar. And yet they haven't killed these initiatives. They are reframing them and being quieter about them. And I think it's number one to kind of like duck down under the fray. They're kind of in the foxhole, but they know the value of it. And no business is ever going to put money into something that loses money and loses money and loses money. So all these organizations that have had DEI efforts for the last 10 years, let's say, or more, they didn't do that because they want to hold hands and sing "We Are the World." They're doing it because it makes money and it makes good business sense. And, even from a talent draw, they get more talented people who come to work for their organizations. So dialing it back, I think, is sad because they're caving to outside pressure, but they are not eliminating it. I do wish that many of them stood firm in the case of this pressure, but it does show you where their heart is, and their heart is with their wallet. And that's business. And I don't like it, but I understand it. And I think they're making a mistake. And I think, if you, here's what it is. Okay. If you value diversity and inclusion, and I really want to talk about the inclusion part. It's not just about adding, different people. It's about making sure that you're garnering the perspectives that they bring and the experience. But if you value that, and if you valued that enough to put a stake in the ground before and say, we believe in this, then your values are not situational. Your values are your values, and they should not be situational. And that's the part that breaks my heart, is that, if Target valued this one day, or Wells Fargo valued this, not just one day, but for years, and then all of a sudden they're like, oh, not anymore. What can I count on them to be about? What do they value that is unnegotiable and not situational? Like, if I look at my values and I think about integrity, my integrity is not situational. I apply it at all times, that, to the best of my ability, right? Or compassion, or, whatever it is. These are values. And truth, things like that. Truth is not situational. Truth is truth. So that's, I think, the hardest part for me to swallow about all this. I don't know what some of these companies then actually stand for. And as a consumer, if I want to make a choice, I want to spend my money with the good guys. But if I thought you were a good guy and not right now you're reeling back on your values, I don't know whether I agree with that or not. I'm still bothered by the fact that you can just change your values.
Well, maybe we can go a little bit more granular in terms of, pulling back or reining in, for lack of a better word, these DEI programs. What does that exactly mean? Is it, their employee resource groups? Is it their hiring process? All of the above?
It's typically not the hiring process, because they understand the value of diverse perspectives. It is it's the really visible stuff. It's the ERG. It's the DEI summit that they might have had. It's some of the sponsorships that they might have had, and they just don't want to be as visible, Chris. So like a sponsorship is a really visible thing, right? I mean, again, if you're Target or Wells Fargo or whatever, you're going, we're sponsoring this big event, then you make yourself a target for the people who don't want that. So internally, what we're hearing is it's almost business as usual, because they do understand and appreciate the value that diverse perspectives bring to a team and diverse experience. That's where it's at. But they're just being quieter about it on the really external things.
Maybe as a follow-up to that, in this apparent new reality, how can organizations that still want to implement diversity initiatives do so without facing a backlash?
I think anybody could face a backlash about anything if you really want to. Look at Chick-fil-A. Look at Chick-fil-A. For years, they got a backlash because they weren't open on Sundays. But again, their values are not situational. They've had, hundreds of consultants that have come in and said, do you realize how much more money you could make if you were open on Sunday? You're forfeiting that business to Wendy's and McDonald's and Taco Bell or whatever. And they're like, we don't care, because that's what we believe. I respect that. And so, I think it's about being true to your core values and staying the course on that. And I think if you're a small business, then you can say things like, we appreciate and respect, all customers. All means all. You can say diversity without ever saying the D word. You can say all. And that's what a lot of businesses and organizations do. They'll say everyone is welcome. We appreciate all customers. So they're using different language, but they're putting the welcome mat out for everyone. And so, if you don't want blowback, then there's other ways to say things, and the rest of us will actually see that and hear that for what it is.
One aspect of the diversity conversation is that people are afraid of saying the wrong thing at work or having what they say taken the wrong way. And as a result, you said that what they do is just say nothing.
Yeah.
What's wrong with saying nothing?
Saying nothing doesn't move the business forward. And I think, first of all, it is difficult to have conversations when you don't know what to say and you're afraid of the HR police or, whatever, or the consequences. And in some organizations, the consequences are very real. The risk is real. But the problem with not saying anything is you're not fully communicating. So, for example, if you and I disagree on something and we work together, we're working on a project and we disagree. Well, we ought to be able to talk about that because it's important to the project, And if I'm afraid of talking to you about that and saying, tell me more about that, then we're just going to end up at an impasse and we're not actually going to understand the full picture and the context of what has to be considered for something to be successful. So I understand it, but I do think the problem with it is that it blocks progress in business and it does not move the ball down the field. And it's a conversation ender. So I feel like in business, we should never end the conversation. We should always be able to talk, especially if we don't agree. That's absolutely when I need to lean into it more and go, Chris, tell me how you see it. Like, I'm not understanding your perspective. Share with me. And there's nothing bad that can happen about that. I mean, it's just nobody ever died of a conversation about differences in views. It's like really important. And that's what good CEOs do. Good CEOs actually do a lot more listening than talking. And they work with their people, whether it's their top team or the rank and file or all employees, whatever, and have town halls and stuff. And they do a lot of listening because they're like, tell me what I need to know. Tell me what I need to hear. They solicit it.
Well, it's the old phrase, God gave me 2 ears and 1 mouth, and so I'll keep my mouth shut and listen.
Yeah. But one of the things I do is give people the script because they truly don't know what to say and they're totally afraid of just trying to clunk their way through it. So one of the things I talk about is eliminating the phrase agree to disagree from your vocabulary, because I was taught that as a child. My parents said, if you don't agree with someone, just say, let's agree to disagree. And it's a very polite phrase and it'll never get you in trouble or anything like that. But again, it's not good for business because if I say to you, Chris, let's agree to disagree, and you say, sure, this conversation's over and we both know it. And that's not where we want to be. So what I teach people to say instead is just lean into it and say, Chris, I see it differently. I see it differently is not combative. I'm not picking a fight with you. I'm not saying you're wrong and I'm right. I'm not even trying to persuade you over to my point of view. It's a simple declarative statement. I see it differently. And what'll happen is when you say that or someone else says that, then the other person goes, well, tell me how you see it. And then we're having a conversation that's actually going somewhere. And it's very beneficial because if you can tell me a little bit more about how you see it, I'm going to have a greater understanding of your perspective and where you're coming from on this. We might not still agree, but I'm going to know more. And that's all we're after in business, is just making informed decisions and understanding other perspectives and balancing all of that into initiatives and decisions.
And it's time to talk about race at work. You write about how to have hard conversations. It's one thing to get instructions on how to have hard conversations and quite another to actually have them.
Yeah.
Bridge that gap to give people the courage to speak up. Is it something we should do one-on-one? What are your thoughts?
I think it depends on the organization and the situation you find yourself in. If it's one-on-one, and you and I are having these hard conversations, and let's just say again, it's about perspective. Like, I really don't get you. I really don't get you. You don't get me. There's some tension there or whatever. I might just peel back the layers of the onion and just start with something like, look, just tell me about yourself. Tell me about yourself. What do I need to know about you that's important? What I like about that is people will tell you what they think is important. I mean, they might start with something like, well, I started out at this company when I was, 25. And then they might go into something like that, but they also might say something like, I was born in a small town in Kentucky, and then I got to go to college in a big city and it rocked my world, or, you never know where it's going to go. But I think the more that we can actually find out about each other and maybe some of the things that shaped us, but then when you're actually having those difficult conversations and you're trying to find the right language or whatever, I mean, again, using things like I see it differently, or if somebody's sharing a perspective that you really don't get, Like maybe you don't agree with it and you have this sort of trigger reaction of like, well, that's not right or whatever. Try to recognize those emotions or whatever. And in that moment, lean into it and say, tell me more about that. Because the tell me more about that is where you're going to find out how this person thinks and how they make decisions and how they came to the beliefs or the understanding or the perspective that they have. And the other thing I think that's really important to know is perspective is never wrong. It's your perspective. It's how you see things. So you can't tell me that if I'm an optimist and I look at, things as like generally in a cheerful way, and I'm not naive. I mean, I do know that it's a dark world out there sometimes, but I tend to look on the glass half full rather than half empty. And you can't tell me I'm wrong for looking at it that way. It's the way I am, any more than I could say to somebody, well, you're wrong for always thinking about doom and gloom. It's how they see things, and so I think that if we can say something like, tell me more about that. Tell me how you see this. What bothers you about this, or what concerns you? Like concern is a great word because it's not a loaded word. What concerns you about this? And what you find a lot is that people are concerned about the outcome of something and how it reflects on them. And then that is actually something that we can dig into and go, okay, if you're concerned about the outcome, how do we talk about making the outcome as good as it can possibly be, not just for you, but for the organization that we're working within. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And I love how you're phrasing it to get them to engage with you further.
Yeah.
What concerns you? Mm-hmm. Help me understand.
Right.
Keep that conversation going. The dialogue is then presumably the longer the talk or the more you talk, you're going to figure it out and come to some sort of agreement or understanding.
Yeah. And I think exactly. And that's all. I mean, we don't have to agree. We just need to understand. So once I understand why you think something, that might open up my mind to kind of go, okay, well, Chris brought up a good point. He sees it this way. I never thought of that. There's some validity to that. I wonder if there's something that we could do that mixes what Chris thinks about it with what I think we should do. And, that's how you get to compromise. That's how you get to real collaboration, really. So, yeah, I mean, I don't think these are terrible conversations. I just think that people don't have the right words and they're so afraid of saying the wrong thing that they just say nothing. That's the tragedy.
Can you tell my wife I made a good point?
Yes.
Help her understand?
Absolutely. Yeah, Chris rocks, just so you know.
It's my new bumper sticker.
There it is.
So while there's fear around saying or doing the wrong thing when interacting with people not like us, there's also tremendous opportunity for growth and improvement. Again, maybe as a follow-up, how do we get ourselves in that mindset of moving away from fear and toward the potential of something good?
I think it's recognizing, first of all, in sort of a scholarly way, that different perspectives are good for business. That's a truism. It's a truth. And the greatest, most innovative companies have always fostered that, whether they were conscious about it or not. They've hired all different kinds of people who think differently, and that's how they come up with innovative products and services. They also do a lot of listening. And the thing I like about listening, and this comes down to like consumer research. Consumer research is nothing more than asking questions of people and then listening to their answers. And the thing that you don't do in consumer research is tell the people that are giving you intel that they're wrong. So if you're Tyson Chicken and you're doing a focus group and you're talking to people who who cook with chicken and you're asking, how many times a week do you eat chicken? And then they go 2 times, and then you don't go, well, that's stupid of you. You should be eating chicken 4 times. I mean, you don't ever demonize your audience, and you listen to people. And, this is a key part of marketing, is that we can't get those consumer insights unless we talk to people and listen. So if you listen and you gather different perspectives, that's what leads to aha. So I'll give you an example, a business example I live in Colorado, and the ski industry is like $1 billion industry here, right? I mean, the entire state's economic engine depends on skiing. Well, years ago, the ski industry was seeing a decline in skiers for 2 reasons. Boomers were getting older and had hip replacements and knee replacements and stuff. And they're not skiing anymore because they're afraid of injury. Or maybe their doctor told them not to do that after a knee replacement or something. Younger skiers were not skiing because they're like, that's my parents' sport. I want to snowboard. But snowboarding was not allowed on the ski slopes. So the boarders had to go into the back country to snowboard. So the slopes were getting skinnier and skinnier and skinnier with the number of skiers, obviously, financially hitting and hurting the industry. Well, the only way they even found out about this was because they actually started talking to young people. There's not much you can do to persuade older people to risk another injury. So they kind of went, okay, we have to replace these skiers with younger skiers. And they started talking to them and going, how come you don't ski? And they were going, well, because I board and I'm not allowed to do that on your ski slopes. And then they also found out that the price was a huge deterrent. The ski lift tickets, the equipment, the this, the that. And so they went to work on this. That is an insight that they would never have if they hadn't just talked to, in focus groups, lots and lots of younger skiers and asked, what do you want? And so they started working with equipment manufacturers for less expensive rentals and doing passes that give you a big discount at the sporting goods store. So your ski pass gets you 25% off discount and stuff. And the whole community of skiing worked together and completely revitalized the ski industry because they listened to what younger skiers had to say and they adapted. That's insight you can't get anywhere else. You can't get that information if you're not talking to people. And so I feel like the listening part is really important. One thing I do want to also say, though, is if you're listening, I have had a number of friends and colleagues of mine who represent, let's say, a diverse consumer group. Okay, so whether they're a Black woman or let's say they're a gay man, my best guy friend is a very out gay man, and he's very comfortable talking, openly about his perspectives and stuff. But one of the things that he doesn't like and resents is when at his team, at his office, they're talking about an initiative and someone will say, well, Cliff, as the gay man in the room, how do you feel about this? And what it does is, yes, he's a very out gay man. He'll tell you that. So it's not a secret. But what that does by shining a spotlight on that person in that way is it's creating an otherness. It's basically saying you're not like the rest of us. And I have a friend who's a Black woman too. And she's like, I'm so tired of people, in a meeting going, so as the Black woman in the room, well, how do you think, so here's the better way. Because I don't believe, Chris, that I can give anybody a don't without giving them a do. So you can't just, tell people don't do that. Then they're going to be like, well, what do I do? So those are valid ways to probe, but not that way. So if you're actually trying to garner a broader point of view from different kinds of people, then what a leader can say in a meeting is, does anyone have any business or life experience to share with the group that would help us do a better job? Does anyone? So have any business or life experience, right, that would help us do a better job. And that way, no one is having a spotlight shined on their perceived otherness. And at the same time, you're opening it up for everybody to chime in, which is, again, what we want is collaboration.
I love how you spun that. Spin's not the right word. I apologize for the way you rephrased and paraphrased that. Again, openness, collectiveness, all of that. So I'm learning a lot today, so I appreciate that. Your book spells out something you call the starting method. What is the starting method and why is that important?
I'm going to have to remember what starting stands for. I don't have it in front of me. The starting method is my method of how a leader who wants to do better and be better. And that's another phrase. Okay. That's another phrase that I really like to use because it's not political. It's not woke. It's not anything. If you're just starting with, do you want to do better and be better as an organization? The heads will nod, right? So one of the ways to do that is to garner the input of your teams and your employees and their diverse perspectives. That's where the magic is at, and it's free. It doesn't cost anything to talk to people. So the starting method is by understanding, STARTING, is starting with literally the idea of this is a strategy. Okay, it's a business tool, right? And then T is for talking, right? Like just start the conversation. And oh my gosh, A is for acknowledging the people who have the different perspectives in the room and on the team, and acknowledging that maybe we haven't done as good of a job as we could have in the past of making sure that we get to hear all voices. R is for respect. You don't have to agree with everybody. You're never going to agree with everybody that you work with, but you do have to have respect personally and professionally. So respect is at the core of any conversations that we have, including any questions that we have or any, trying to elicit input and things like that. It's not creating otherness. It's about respect. And T is for training, because people do need to be trained in this. I mean, this is a great conversation, and there's a little bit of training that's gone in here because I've given some do's and don'ts and some phrases. But if you're truly trying to bring your team along to have better conversations, especially about the things that they're afraid of talking about, or they just don't know they don't know the right words, and they want to know the right words. Number one, they're hungry for this, but number two, teach them to, you can teach them to say, I see it differently. You can teach them to say, tell me more about that. Or how did you come up with that? And then ING, okay. Wow, it's been a while. I'm sorry. I is for invest. Just continue to invest in this. It can be dollars, but it can just be time. In other words, you don't have a meeting where you go, we're going to do a better job of garnering everybody's perspective. And then you walk away from that meeting and go, all right, we did that, And so it's about an ongoing conversation. And N is for networking, making sure that you're always talking to different kinds of people. I have worked really hard to broaden my group of friends and my business colleagues because, number one, it's so interesting. And number two, I've been exposed to so many things that I would never have been exposed to. And number three, it just makes me a better business person because now I've got some insights to share with other people when I'm talking about, I have a friend who went through this exact same thing 2 years ago and here's what they did or, whatever. And then G is keep going and setting goals. I think if you're a leader, it is about making sure that you're putting a stake in the ground and saying, what are we trying to do here? Again, we're not just going to sit, and hold hands and sing We Are the World. What are we trying to do? Are we trying to get more active voices around the table? Are we trying to actually penetrate a new market that we haven't really ever explored? Are we trying to recruit a broader swath of people with, broader experience? What are the goals? And keep going.
Yeah. Thank you for remembering what starting is, because I didn't have it in my notes, so I couldn't have helped you there. Sorry. Kelly, you grew up in a very upscale, very white Milwaukee suburb. Mm-hmm. Do people ever ask you, what does this woman know about diversity, equity, inclusion? And if so, what do you tell them?
For sure. Obviously, again, I'm not what people think when they think that a diversity expert is going to show up on stage looking like me, and I get it. So what I tell people is just because I'm white does not make me unqualified to be an expert in this area. I've studied it and I've been doing it for 22 years, long before DEI was ever a phrase coined. I mean, nobody was talking about this 22 years ago. But also, just because you are a gay man or just because you are a person of color or just because you are disabled does not make you an expert on diversity either. What it does is it makes you an expert on your own perspective, and that's valid, but it doesn't make you an expert on the business of diversity, the discipline of diversity. So framing it as people not like you, I come back to my marketing training because long before I was ever doing this, I was working for global ad agencies. And one of the things that we do in global ad agencies is try to figure out where the new customer is going to be found, right? You've got your core customers. You're not successful without them. But how much more successful could you be if you can get the people that you're not getting, but you could be? And usually that's rooted in research. And usually the research reveals some consumer insights that might be very specific to a certain group. For example, women read more customer reviews and testimonials online than men, far more. And they put a lot of stock in them. And they put real stock in what other women say. So if I'm reading a review and it says that the review was written by Jennifer B. in Minneapolis, I'm going to look at that and go, you know what? She's telling me the truth because we think our sisters don't ever lie to us, right? And so there's insights absolutely everywhere. And I come at it from the discipline of business, not from a personal experience of, I don't know what it's like to be a man. I don't know what it's like to be disabled. I'm not a person of color. I'm not, bisexual or gay. And so it's like, I don't know these things and I will never pretend to know those things. But what I do know is the business of diversity and how to make business better with diverse teams and why it's important. And that's what I bring to the table. And it's funny, if I can tell one quick story, do we have time? One quick story.
Absolutely. Please.
So a couple of years ago, I was asked to speak to the Chicago Association of Realtors, and it was their very first diversity conference. Okay. So probably 200 people there, really nice size conference, not too big, not too small, Goldilocks. And I'm the keynote speaker. And I walk in and I would say 2/3 of the room is Black. Another quarter of the room is gay. And the remaining percentage, don't make me do this geometry wise, is, women or, other people of other, colors, et cetera, or whatever. And I'm like the white woman, who's going to get up there and talk about this. And so I thought, okay, I have to overcome the objection that they're too polite to say, but they're going to be thinking, which is when I take the stage. And so I started with, I know I'm not what you expect when you think of someone who's going to come and talk to you about diversity. So I named the elephant in the room before they could, right? And so I was like, I know I'm not what you expect when you think about this. And I said, but I am an expert in this, and I've written 4 books on this, and my works are widely published and featured. And if you truly believe in diversity, equity, and inclusion, then you have to include people like me. And all of them were like, and so this woman came up to me afterwards and she said, when your foot hit the stage, I tuned out. She said, I tuned out. I thought, what is this white woman going to tell me about diversity? And she said, and then you started talking and I tuned back in. And I came at it again from not some standpoint of, I know these things personally or have experienced these things, but from this scholastic academic business side of it, which was a different perspective than what most people get at a diversity conference. And it went really, really, really well. And I thought, this is diversity, is you're getting a different perspective. But, it's just, I know I'm not what people expect, but I'll be honest with you, Chris, too. 95% of the audiences that I speak to are majority white. And I think one of the things that works for me in this space is that I look like they do. And they're okay with that. Not that they would reject somebody else, but they can't reject what I'm saying if I look like them. If somebody is up there who's Asian or Black or brown or disabled or gay or whatever, they're going to go, well, of course you're going to say that. You're the gay guy. Or of course you're going to say that you're brown or, you're Asian or whatever it is. Of course you're going to say that. Or of course you're going to say that you're disabled. But if I'm up there and I'm none of those things, and I'm like, look, this is a business opportunity. And there's data that shows that this is important and it works. And you're probably already doing some of it or whatever. They can't dismiss me.
So how'd you go from working? How'd you go from working for global ad agencies to being a DEI expert?
I was really burned out. So there's a joke in the advertising industry that says it's a 20-year business. You get in your 20s and you get out in your 40s because you're just fried. And I found that to be the case. I was really, really tired and fried. It's a hard driving industry. And also, I was doing very, very well. I was in leadership positions, VP, SVP, et cetera. And I was getting further and further away from what I actually loved, which was advertising. The higher you go, it's just more about managing people instead of doing the real work. So I was really burned out. It wasn't fun for me anymore. And I thought, okay, but I'm a one-trick pony. Like, this is all I've ever done is advertising. So, what's my new trick? And I started doing a lot of research and reading about like how to find your purpose and all this kind of stuff. And I read one paragraph in one book. I read a bunch of things, but I read one paragraph in one book that got me here. And it said, if you really want to find out what your natural gifts are, because most of us can be successful if we really lean into those natural gifts, think about every time you've ever gotten an attaboy or an attagirl. And what were you doing? So I really gave that some deep thought. Like, I didn't just think about that for 2 seconds ago. I had to really think. And over the course of several days, I came up with, it's always when I've done a presentation. and a client has come up to me afterwards and said, that was fantastic, or wow, you really opened my eyes to something, or you took a very complex concept or issue and you made it really accessible for me. Like you really explained it well. So I thought ultimately I have a gift for taking complex information and in 50 minutes, condensing it to a meeting for the VP of marketing or whatever. And then I thought there's only two things I can think of to do with this. One is to teach, because really what I am is a teacher, right? I could go, work for a college, become an adjunct professor or something like that, or I could be a professional speaker. So I just decided to be a professional speaker. And I started with how to market to US Hispanics, because that was the biggest topic in marketing and business. And that's what I knew. I was trained in that. The last ad agency I worked for was a multicultural agency that specialized in Hispanic marketing in Texas. So I knew that. And I knew the opportunity. I knew how to do that. I knew how to guide clients on this. That's what we had been doing. And there was a tremendous demand for that topic at that time. And so that's what launched my career. And then it was another client, like I said in the beginning, who said, we value all customer groups. Can you do something broader? And then boom, off to the races. And here we are 22 years later.
As someone who's an adjunct professor, you chose the right path.
I have some friends who are adjunct professors and they absolutely love it, but they said there is no money in it. You have to just do it because you want to and you love it.
Yep,
and
you love
I
it.
may
Exactly.
do that at some point in time, but I'm still learning, so.
Kelly, we have just a few minutes left. I mentioned the titles of your books earlier on, but would you share all four of them with us again and where we can find them?
Sure. All four can be found on anywhere online where books are sold. Obviously, the big behemoths like Amazon and Barnes & Noble, but I value all of our independent booksellers as well. And here in Colorado, we have an independent bookseller, and, there's Powell in Portland and things like that. So the names of my books are How to Market to People Not Like You, Crafting the Customer Experience for People Not Like You, How to Work with People Not Like You, How to Work with and Lead People Not Like You. Gee, it's this one that's like right behind me here. And my latest one is It's Time to Talk About Race at Work, Every Leader's Guide to Making Progress on Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. So if you just put into a Google search, Kelly McDonald books, they'll come up wherever books are sold.
And if people want you to come speak, where can they find you?
They can email me at Kelly, Kelly, at McDonaldmarketing.com. And I'm McDonald like the hamburgers, not like the farmer. So I'm a Mick, not a Mac.
Not a Mac.
Okay. So McDonald marketing.com, Kelly at McDonaldmarketing.com. You can connect with me on LinkedIn. I am Kelly C. McDonald on LinkedIn. C as in cat. My middle name is Christine. There's a million Kelly McDonalds. And I'll come up that way. And you can call me, 214-929-7700. That's my cell number. Call me or text me. I'm self-employed. I love to talk to people about working for them.
Kelly, Christine, McDonald, thank you so much for being with us today. I really appreciate your time and your insights.
Thank you, Chris. It's been a great conversation. I've enjoyed it.
It's been a lot of fun. I learned a lot, so thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Chris Meek. We're out of time. We'll see you next week, same time, same place. Until then, stay safe and keep taking your next steps forward.